Today is the day of my perm appointment, hurry home and make my lunch. My mother-in-law's voice rang out across the room because I accidentally answered her call on speaker. At that time, I was attending my father's funeral, and hearing my mother-in-law's voice, my father-in-law began to shake with anger. She was demanding that I make her lunch because she had a perm appointment at the salon. Despite us being in the midst of my father's funeral, as he had passed away from an illness, she had told my father-in-law that she was feeling unwell and would not attend. Upon hearing this, my father-in-law was furious. Taking my smartphone, he said, "I never thought you could be so insensitive. We are getting a divorce," and hung up without listening to any excuses from my mother-in-law. The funeral ended without further issues, but my persistent mother-in-law continued to cling to me. My name is Kathy. I'm turning 50 this year. I used to work as a secretary for a certain company, but since getting married, I've been working part-time at a supermarket. My husband is a wonderful person, though he seems slightly indifferent to his surroundings. He doesn't notice when I change my hairstyle or hair color. And he seems uninterested even when I cook something different than usual. However, I loved that he always prioritized what I wanted to do and would come to my rescue when necessary. We've been married for several decades now. My husband and I decided not to have children, so it's just the two of us living together now. We originally wanted children, but since both of us have fertility issues, we decided not to have them. My parents respected my decision, but my mother-in-law felt differently. Other families have so many grandchildren, and here I am, never able to hold a grandchild in my life. I really wonder why he married someone like her. She would nag. I and my husband both have difficulty having children. Infertility treatments require both money and physical strength, and we've made this decision after serious discussion. I would appreciate your understanding, I've explained to her multiple times. However, my mother-in-law is very selfish and stubborn, believing that it's only natural for women to give birth. So, every time I went with my husband to visit his parents, she would make snide remarks. By this age, I've stopped caring and haven't even bothered to tell my husband. She probably didn't like how I just brushed her off. She brings up the topic of children whenever she can. Especially when my husband or father-in-law is not around. There was one particular instance, when we were visiting. And my husband and father-in-law went fishing together. They left early in the morning, leaving me alone with my mother-in-law for a long time. You really lack in consideration, you should have more respect for your husband's mother. I'm sorry, can you please tell me what upset you? At that time, I didn't understand why my mother-in-law was displeased. After all, I had been taking care of cleaning and all the household chores at my in-laws. It's something I always do when we visit, but she somehow found a reason to criticize. You know, how about you think for yourself, it's embarrassing to be your age and not have children. I had my kids in my early 20s. As I've mentioned before, both my husband and I have fertility issues. Moreover, it's becoming more common for couples to choose not to have children these days, it's different from your time. What's that supposed to mean? Are you saying my thinking is old-fashioned? Indeed, her thinking is quite outdated. But voicing that would surely provoke her further. I held back what I really wanted to say and responded. Oh no. Not at all, I believe you've always been hardworking, and that's why your son turned out so well. I'm not sure if she was satisfied, but she didn't bother me further that day. Though her snide remarks no longer bother me, it's still stressful. So, I've been keeping my distance as much as possible. Then, to my surprise, she started showing up at our house. About an hour after my husband left for work, the doorbell rang. We weren't expecting anyone that day, so I assumed it was just a salesperson and decided to ignore it. However, the doorbell kept ringing over and over again. I had a bad feeling about this. Mainly because I had been ignoring calls and messages from my mother-in-law recently. But it's quite a distance from my in-laws to our place, about a 3-hour train ride. So I never imagined she would actually come to our house. Please wait, I'll be right there. As I opened the door, I saw my mother-in-law standing there, looking furious. Hey, when the doorbell rings, you're supposed to answer right away, how many times do you think I rang it? Why are you here? Why, you're asking why are you ignoring my calls? It's not that I was ignoring you, I've just been a little busy and couldn't answer. Busy, that's no excuse for someone who's just working part-time. I've been swamped, I'm sorry, so, what brings you here today? I came to confront you about not answering the phone. Well, since I'm here, I guess it's okay for me to come in. Before I could respond, my mother-in-law forced her way through the front door and into the house. What's this then? You should wash the dishes right after cooking. And, isn't there dust around here? Are you keeping the house clean? And what about the way these dishes are arranged? Isn't there a better way? I wasn't expecting you, so I thought I'd do it later. Do it later, huh? Such luxury, and this while your husband is at work. I have work too, and it would be helpful if you could leave soon. Oh, you're asking me to leave already? What a thing to say to your husband's mother. Saying that, she went into our bedroom. Hey, that's the bedroom. Is it a problem for me to enter the bedroom? Oh, you wear these pajamas? No wonder you don't have grandchildren? Don't you have anything cuter? Exhausted by my mother-in-law's behavior, I was at a loss for words. Seeing my state, she seemed satisfied and said, well, I just dropped by today, so it can't be helped. Make sure everything's in order by the next time I visit, and then she left. Honestly, I started to feel the impact of her snide remarks from the moment she invaded our home. That's because my father was diagnosed with an illness. I've always enjoyed playing with my father since I was little, and even as an adult, we'd sometimes go out for meals. But then he was diagnosed with an illness and given only a few months to live. I made as much time as possible to visit my father and shared many conversations. A year after the terminal diagnosis, my father passed away. Although he was given only a few months to live, even the doctors were surprised he lasted a year. I think your family's love reached him, said the doctor, and my mother and I couldn't help but cry. My father's funeral was arranged, but for some reason, my mother-in-law was the only one who didn't attend. Apparently, she suddenly fell ill and couldn't make it. Whether that was true or not, I sent her a message of concern anyway. The funeral proceeded smoothly, and afterward, I noticed a flood of notifications on my smartphone. Both calls and messages, all from my mother-in-law, numbering in the dozens. Which made me worry if there was some trouble. It was so excessive that I even asked my husband and father-in-law, but neither of them had received anything. Maybe you should call her back, it might be something she can only say to you, my father-in-law suggested. Just as I decided to call her back, my mother-in-law called. In my hurry, I accidentally answered in speaker mode. Today's my perm appointment day, hurry back and make my lunch. If you don't hurry, I'll miss my appointment, her voice echoed through the room. Although the attendees had already left, my father-in-law and husband were nearby. The sudden loud voice surprised them, but such incidents were routine for me, so I wasn't shocked. However, I remembered that my mother-in-law had claimed to be too ill to attend the funeral. I heard you were not feeling well. That's obviously a lie, there's no way I would be unwell. Attending your family's funeral is just a hassle. I had a perm appointment at the salon today. Canceling that was out of the question. Anyway, hurry back and make lunch, I have to leave the house in less than 2 hours. Hearing her voice over the speaker, my father-in-law started to tremble. I could see his hands shaking with anger. Are you listening? Answer me. Overwhelmed by my father-in-law's intensity, I was at a loss for words when my mother-in-law demanded a response. Kathy, could you lend me your smartphone? Of course, that's fine. This is exactly what's wrong with you, I need to have a serious talk with my son too. What are you talking about? Who's this? It's me, your husband. You, Kathy, why is he on this call? I heard everything from the next room, have you always spoken to Kathy like that? No, this is different. And what about what you said earlier? Weren't you too sick to move, so you couldn't attend the funeral, a hair salon appointment? Don't joke with me. What do you think of your son's wife's family? Well, I couldn't cancel my salon appointment, it's been months, a woman needs to stay beautiful, right? You'd prefer that too. You comparing a hair salon appointment to a funeral, enough, I finally understand that talking to you is pointless. I've been thinking about it for a while, but now I've made up my mind. We're getting a divorce, pack your things and leave, if you're not gone by the time I get back, I won't hold back. Wait a minute, how can you say that all of a sudden, where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem, go back to your parents' house, just leave, we're definitely getting a divorce. I'll be back tonight, so have your things packed by then. With that, my father-in-law hung up the call. I'm sorry you had to go through that, thanks for lending me your phone. No, I've never seen Dad so angry. Have you always been harassed by my mom like that? Well, it's been like that since we got married. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to worry you, and over time, I got used to it. Lately, with your dad's situation, it's been a bit stressful. As a couple, you should report these things to me. Why? Because it's unbearable to see someone you love getting hurt. That's right, Kathy, Mike always puts you first, so please feel free to talk to us about anything. The sadness of losing my father and the warmth of meeting such kind people overwhelmed me, and I burst into tears right there. That night, my father-in-law didn't go home but stayed with us instead. That's because my mother-in-law was still squatting at our place. The reason she didn't want to go back to her family home is related to her family dynamics. At her family home, her brother is in charge, and she has always been pushed around by him since she was young. Going back divorced, she didn't know what would be said to her. Knowing this, she absolutely didn't want to return. However, my father-in-law had anticipated this and had begun preparations to move out after the funeral. For now, he's staying with us until he finds a new place to live. I'm sorry for troubling you, Kathy. No, not at all, I'm always grateful for your help, and it's no trouble at all. Plus, you're always welcome to stay as long as you need. Being with my mother-in-law alone might be tough for me. Seeing him laugh without reservation for the first time. Probably because we had never had such a casual conversation before. I was truly surprised at myself for making such a light-hearted joke. But really, if it's okay with you, you're welcome to stay here. I hate to be a burden, but I'll take you up on that offer. Though we had talked before, we never joked like this. I think the incident at the funeral, where he stood up to my mother-in-law, has allowed us to talk like this. In a way, I might even be thankful to her. I received several messages and voicemails blaming me for my father-in-law not returning home. But he told me not to respond to any of them, so I never did. My father-in-law finally arranged to move out, but my mother-in-law still refused to leave. It seemed like a hassle for him to go, so my husband and I decided to pick up his stuff. Knowing my mother-in-law would be out for lunch every Wednesday, we targeted that time to go to the family home. As expected, the house was empty, making the task straightforward. My father-in-law isn't one to keep a lot of possessions, so the moving process was finished in a few hours. The larger furniture was taken care of by a service, so it wasn't too much work. We decided to bring my father-in-law's belongings to our house, and we were able to move everything successfully. That night, my father-in-law's phone was bombarded with calls from my mother-in-law. Feeling it was excessively persistent, my father-in-law answered, and even just by her voice, it was clear my mother-in-law was panicking. Hey, what's going on? When I came home, all your stuff was gone. Where did you move it? I told you, we're getting a divorce. So, as the first step, I decided to move out. My belongings are already out, only yours are left. Moving out of the house? What are you talking about? We won't have a place to live. You mean you won't have a place to live, right? I've decided to live with my son and his wife. What? I didn't hear about this. Well, I'm telling you now for the first time. Anyway, the moving out preparations are done. You have to vacate within a week. It's better for you to leave sooner. How can you say this all of a sudden? You have your family home, don't you? Or maybe you'll move in with your lover. Hearing my father-in-law and mother-in-law's conversation, we couldn't believe our ears at the sudden mention of infidelity. Wait, what are you talking about, infidelity? I've been thinking about divorce for a while now. I've known about your affair for ages. That's your misunderstanding. I've never had an affair. Is that so? If you say it like that, then it must be true. So you say, then come back and forget about moving out. No, I can't do that. Why not? I had my son and his wife hire a detective agency to investigate. So, I know about your weekly Wednesday lunches with your lover. Of course, I've gathered plenty of evidence. Ideally, I would want to demand compensation for adultery, but considering you've kept the house up until now, I'll let it slide. Just stay away from me and my son's family from now on. What do you mean, without me? Your son wouldn't have been born, and you wouldn't have had a comfortable life, and now, to treat me like this is unbelievable. That's why I said I'm grateful. But that doesn't justify adultery or betraying your family. I have no intention of spending the rest of my life with someone who continues to lie." With that, my father-in-law forcefully ended the call. "So, she was having an affair. I had no idea. I didn't want to trouble you or my son any more than necessary, plus, being seen as a man who was cheated on is a bit embarrassing." My father-in-law said this with a slight laugh, but it was evident being betrayed by a spouse was a shock. That evening, my husband and I decided to order some high-end sushi for everyone. Having this luxurious sushi, and here I am about to be a burden by moving in. "Thank you, I'm sorry." "What are you talking about? You're family. It's normal for families to trouble each other, plus, you'll be helping out with cooking from now on, so be prepared." "Cooking? It's been a while, I'm not sure if I can do it." "What do you mean? The meals you've always made were delicious." My father-in-law used to be a chef. He would cook for us whenever my mother-in-law was not around, and his dishes were always exquisite. We ended up moving to a new place because my husband's job required us to relocate. We lived in the city before, but now we've moved to the countryside. Of course, my father-in-law moved with us, and we built a new house with that in mind. Though we successfully moved to the countryside, I struggled to find a new job due to the limited employment opportunities. So, I decided to pursue something I had always wanted to do: opening a daycare. I had heard that many children couldn't be accommodated by kindergartens due to family circumstances. Despite deciding not to have children, the desire to interact with kids never faded. Thus, we decided to start a daycare in a manner similar to volunteering. It was challenging with just my savings, but with financial support from my husband and father-in-law, my dream came true. There were no daycares in our new community, and the neighbors were truly grateful. With nowhere to go, seemingly at her wit's end, my mother-in-law stormed into her lover's house. It turns out her lover was also married, and she ended up in a huge fight with his wife. The reason I know this: the lover's wife and my own mother were friends. At first, it seemed too coincidental to be true, but according to my mother, it appears to be the case. It was a huge mess, so much that the neighbors called the police. In the end, the police managed to calm things down, but my friend was furious and insisted on demanding compensation. But I wonder if she can even pay it. After all, she never really worked properly, did she? It's doubtful she has any savings. Yes, my mother-in-law had been married to my father-in-law since their student days and had never worked. It was clear she couldn't afford any compensation. My father-in-law knew this and hence did not demand any compensation. Due to the commotion she caused, her lover also lost interest in her. It seemed my mother-in-law had plans to eventually be with her lover, but he had no such intentions. The damage done to her by being turned away by her lover's wife, who even called her a stalker, must have been significant. My mother, who saw my mother-in-law in town, said she looked even older than before. That must be stress, though it's the result of her own actions. It's still pitiful to see a woman age like that. The lover's wife, despite demanding compensation, decided not to divorce him. She plans to make him atone for his sins by supporting her for a lifetime. Sure, getting divorced might free him. But as long as the affair hangs over him, he will have no choice but to devote himself and respect his wife's opinions. Running the daycare, I spend my days happily with the children. Though they are not my own, and I sometimes feel cautious, I never imagined I could live a life filled with children. Children grow up so fast, and being a part of that growth is nothing short of happiness. I make it a point to share their progress with their parents, taking daily photos and videos of the kids. Some parents have even requested albums or DVDs for a fee. And they are delighted when these are given as gifts for birthdays or events. What started as a hobby for me has turned into days filled with gratitude for being appreciated by everyone. Now, I find myself wondering what more I can do for our community. And as for my mother-in-law, she started working part-time for the first time to pay off her compensation. Having nowhere to live, she reluctantly returned to her family home. Her own brother has tasked her with all the household chores, and she's been sending me complaints about balancing work and home life. I entertained her messages with a sense of amusement for a while. But feeling the happiness in my own life, I realized I didn't need that negativity. Just recently, I blocked all contact from my mother-in-law. From now on, I want to forget about her and focus on my family and the children at the daycare, putting them first. I also want to ensure I never end up like my mother-in-law, and I strive to remember gratitude every day.